The Timeline is a Blue Wire podcast. Welcome to the Timeline, a Phoenix Suns podcast. Back after the most exciting free agency I've ever seen. How you doing, Sam?
I'm doing good. We've got stuff to talk about today for sure. We wanted to give it 24 hours after free agency opens so that we had something. And we have stuff, right? We're going to talk about free agency today. We have stuff. We have a full episode's worth of stuff for you guys. It is a little puzzling, though. This has been the most, and we know why it is, right? So we could talk about the why.
It's Drew Eubanks' fault.
Well, I wasn't going to go there. I was going to blame other current NBA players for it first, but let's just be honest. You know, we did our whole free agency stream on Playback yesterday for the first few hours. Thank you to everyone who joined. It was still fun. We had Kellen, our friend, with us too. That was fun. But it was kind of a bust. There wasn't a lot of news coming out, especially in those first 2 or 3 hours. And even now that we are past 24 hours after free agency has opened, I would still say only a quarter to maybe a third of the real impactful guys. Maybe a little bit more than that, but like maybe a third of the real role players who are available in free agency have actually been signed. And the news is trickling in hour by hour. Woj and Shams, they're working. Chris Haynes sometimes too with a little scoop here or there. But for the most part, it's just trickling in 1 or 2 transactions per hour. And we have not seen the floodgates open like we were anticipating, both you and me, as people who've followed the NBA basically all our lives. Anyone who's followed the NBA their entire life, this is like nothing we've ever seen. And it appears to be an indication of maybe a permanent change for the NBA. Maybe this is,
I don't know.
Or at least a new era.
The problem is
it could
that
be
it's
reversed.
boring.
It could be reversed.
It's boring.
But this is what free agency appears to be now. Unless current policies are reversed.
It's the idea that, well, what it made me realize overall is that tampering is more fun. It's just more fun. Now, how much actual NBA fans care about tampering? I think that they don't at all. Like, I think that NBA fans in general, they just don't care. There's not this assumption that without the tampering, they wouldn't have ended up on this team, because that's not how humans work. You know, they choose where they want to go based on the situation and based on the money. That's really all it is. And that situation and money, you know, a few days ago, it's not different than today. Tampering is only a problem from Adam Silver's perspective, apparently. Now, the last team punished for tampering was, of course, the Phoenix Suns. And based on what you're saying, maybe the last team ever punished for tampering, because of apparently just based on the way it's gone, there was zero tampering this year. Or at least they're putting out the idea, teams are, and along with Woj and agents and Shams and all the rest of the newsbreakers, are putting out the idea that there's no tampering done this year. Whether or not there still was, I don't know. Who cares? Like, it doesn't really matter to me. But free agency in the past was an event. You know, all this stuff happened within the first 5 minutes of free agency.
Absolutely.
We all understood. We all understood what was happening, right? We all understood that these deals were all made before. They just weren't allowed to be announced until that time. And it was like fireworks every time. And this time, it was a dud, just a complete bust. Nothing happened for hours, and the first guy signed, I think, was Andre Drummond, and he announced it himself. Like, that's not exactly what we want NBA social events, because that's what this really is, to be.
I'm totally with you, man. I almost feel a little bit sentimental talking about it, because like this is my upbringing in a way. Free agency, the trade deadline, like the NBA. I've always been like primarily a basketball fan before any other sport. It's just how I've always been. We talk a lot about the death of the monoculture, in the 21st century. And when we talk about that, you know where I'm going with this, but when we talk, it's really about events, right? When we talk about that, usually people are referring to music. We don't all listen to the same music anymore. We don't all watch the same movies anymore. We don't all watch the same. We don't all watch MASH. We don't all watch the same TV shows because there's a million different streaming platforms. Everything is nicheified. But in a weird way, like sports events like free agency on July 1st for the NBA is an example of monoculture that we are now losing. Adam Silver and CJ McCollum fucking crapped on my childhood. They took away my Star Wars, basically. This was my Star Wars. And I don't have that anymore. I'm looking at Spotrac here. Again, it's 10 p.m. Eastern time. We are 28 hours into free agency. As of recording here, there have been 45 agreements with players. Of course, nothing becomes official until July 6th. But there have been 45 agreements, and 156 players who are free agents are still out there. So 3/4 of the guys, 3/4 of the names are still out there. Some of those guys will definitely be just two-way players and whatever. The Suns got a two-way guy today, by the way. That was one of their contribution to the 45. But there are so many players out there, and I don't understand at this point what's taking so long, because it's like the big names are starting to move. So you would think that some of the holdouts would follow suit now, and it's just taking a really long time.
We had, just to show how NBA fans were used to this, we had the most people we've ever had on playback at one time for the start of free agency, and nothing happened. Hundreds and hundreds of people joined us for that, and it was a dud. And playback is a website that didn't even exist a few years ago. To get all these people all in one place just for this one event, I think was awesome, and it should have been a lot of fun, and the NBA nuked all the fun. Now, not to say that we didn't still have fun. We did still have fun on the stream. It just was in ways that we didn't anticipate.
We talked a lot about
the conversation.
Luke Cornett and
Omer Yurtseven,
Neemias Quita, whose name I still don't know how to pronounce, and I refuse to learn how to actually pronounce his name. But some of what we were talking about yesterday was ridiculous.
I do think it in a way it might be good for your health specifically, because
my health is great, brher.
The way that it's trickled out, because for a while there, in the first 45 minutes of free agency, you went in every year. You went insane, because it always took the Suns a little bit longer to sign guys than anyone else. And when it was all happening, everything was coming out really, really fast. I mean, that drove you to really some sort of breaking point. I don't know if that breaking point is coming for you
raw
now.
No, right now we feel good, and we'll keep getting to it. I mean, some guys who I like have come off the board just like in the past hour or two, but it's the pure, unadulterated adrenaline rush of, here I am, I've done my free agency research, I've got a list of 10 guys, and oh no, in the last 45 minutes, 6 of those guys have come off the board. I want to be unmedicated for that. I want to feel every moment of it. It's great. That's what I'm in this for, Mike. I want to feel free agency to the fullest extent. I don't want Adam Silver to strip me of that experience. That's what July is about. It's incredible. And now we've lost an element of that. That being said, we probably shouldn't waste any more time here. The Suns did strike.
They signed one player. Yeah.
and they got
a Mark Bartelstein client.
They got a Mark Bartelstein client who is maybe the number one guy that they wanted all along. I'm just speculating there. I don't actually know anything. It's just funny to think of this guy as like their number one free agent target. And that is, of course, Mason Plumlee of the Los Angeles Clippers. Most recently of the Los Angeles Clippers, signing a 1-year veteran minimum deal with the Suns. Initial reactions.
How many years after his brother played for the Suns? What was that?
It's been 10 years.
2013, 14? Yeah, so 10 years later, we got another Plumlee. They played in college together. That's how Miles Plumlee just completely disappeared from the league. But now, Mason Plumlee on the Suns. And yeah, my initial reaction as a backup center, that's an upgrade. Now, am I acknowledging the fact that we had very low standards as far as upgrading. Yes, but we also only had minimum contracts. So you have to sort of judge each of the Suns signings with all of that context around it. And Mason Plumlee, pretty good. Now, does he check a lot of the boxes that we wanted to check for a backup center? Not necessarily, because in some ways we were trying to find a player that was different than Nurkic. And although I do think he's better at like small things like ball handling in a minor way. In a lot of ways, the rest of his skill set is similar. Like, he's a pretty good passer. I think he's probably a better finisher at the rim.
He is.
Not a good free throw shooter. So, so we'll get used to the free throw shooting, depending on whether or not Nurkic fixes his. We'll get used to the free throw shooting not being perfect.
Well, interestingly,
but he is overall a pretty solid big man coming off the bench. Older in his career, so we need him to stay as healthy as possible, but pretty solid.
Yep. He's 34 years old now. I think the Suns had an interesting strategy there where Mason Plumlee is a guy, if you look at him a couple years ago, I mean, he's only 1 or 2 years removed, to be entirely honest with you, of being a very impactful role player for teams like Charlotte. And then I think when he went to the Clippers, and he's been on the Clippers for a season, and it was really... I mean, it was a year and a half, but it didn't feel like that because he missed some time with an MCL sprain, and that's something we should get into as well. Like, he's 34 years old. He has an injury history now. There's some baggage associated with Mason Plumlee now. But his last year and a half with the Clippers has been a little bit of a wind-down period for him. 2 years ago, I'm sure he probably didn't envision himself having to sign for minimum contracts, and now here he is. On the other hand, there's some upside there that I'm sure the Suns feel that if he's in the right circumstance and he has a clean slate of health, that they can reform certain aspects of his game, and he can be the old Mason Plumlee for them. I remarked on Twitter that what was really just important, and of course, like, let's be honest, Mason Plumlee, if you listened to our free agency episode a couple days ago, we didn't mention him. We mentioned other guys like Mo Bamba, who just signed with the Clippers, actually, to be Mason Plumlee's
We're trying to
replacement.
find something different than Nurkic, for me at the very least.
Yeah, we mentioned guys like Mo Bamba.
I'm desperate for shooting off the bench. That's really all it is.
We mentioned Goga Batadze. He just re-signed.
Kevin Love.
Actually, wait, where did Goga go? He re-signed, right?
Back to Orlando.
Okay, he back to Orlando for
way
more.
A pretty big deal.
Way more than the Suns could have offered him. Mason Plumlee, though, he checks the boxes in the sense that I talked about defensive versatility. It feels like, not that he has defensive versatility, but it feels like the Suns have made an effort to add more defensive versatility at the 5 in the form of all their other role players, right? Ryan Dunn, we're thinking maybe he can play some small ball 5. Oso Ighodaro is very clearly an undersized 5. KD, I don't know if he wants to do it, but he's still really effective when he does play the 5. Bol, who we'll talk about him in a little bit. Suns are bringing back Bol. He can play some 5. So they've got all these options for defensive versatility, none of them who you want to consistently be the guy who backs up Nurkic for 15 or 20 minutes. And so for that guy, they ended up pegging Mason Plumlee, who's just really good at the basics. He's a better rebounder than Drew Eubanks. He averaged 12.5 rebounds per 36 last year. Drew Eubanks was at only 9.9. Yes, he can handle the ball, but he's also a solid screener. He's got good size. He held opponents to 58% shooting within 6 feet of the basket, so that's solid rim protection. He doesn't get a ton of blocks, but he's a solid rim protector, even at this stage of his career, who can perform well in drop coverage. So you don't necessarily think about that defensive versatility aspect with Plumlee, but he can play inside of that one defensive coverage. He rebounds the hell out of the ball, particularly on the defensive glass. He sets good screens, and he's comfortable handling the ball in the middle of the floor. All of this points to a guy who should be an upgrade over Drew Eubanks and will just be solid at doing big man things for 15 or 20 minutes a night. Can he play in the playoffs? I don't know. That's gonna be a question. Right. Maybe he doesn't have to, because you have all these other options who you're thinking these guys can play. When we trim the rotation down to 7 or 8 guys in the playoffs, we can play all of these very small options at the 5, and maybe that becomes an option for the Suns too.
If you're signing a minimum guy, you're always going to have the question of whether or not they can play in the playoffs.
Yeah.
There's a stretch of Mason Plumlee's career where he was just averaging between 4 and 5 assists per 36 minutes for like a good 5 6 years of his career, where he's just a pretty good passer too. Now you think about what was missing from the offense when Nurkic came out of the floor, and a lot of it was the playmaking. Now, in some ways, this is a Moneyball thing of, if you don't have a point guard, can you create a point guard in the aggregate, right? Can you put enough passing on the floor that the guys find a way to get assists out of it? Well, that could happen a lot of times with Nurkic on the floor. You take him off the floor, it collapsed. They needed a point guard to help Drew Eubanks out. I think there is a little bit of thought here that Mason Plumlee can recreate some of the offensive things that Nurkic was doing effectively, with the handoffs, the fake cuts, the fake handoffs, the passes to the rim, and of course getting it out to shooters if they pass it to him in the middle of the floor. To some extent, I even think there's a longer stretch of his career, Mason, of showing that kind of passing than there was of Nurkic's. This was kind of Nurkic's best passing season, whereas, Mason's done this for a while. Like, he's had, multiple seasons where he's averaged. In 22-23, he averaged 3.7 assists with Charlotte. I know that's not a ton for a guard, but for a center, that's pretty good for a center.
No, that's good.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention he has a career assist to turnover ratio of 1.7, which is kind of like, for a point guard, that would be bad, but for a center, it's really good. So it's all about perspective. Drew Eubanks, for his career, is at a flat 1.0, gets as many assists to turnovers. A lot of his assists are probably just basic. Guard comes off a handoff, and they credit Eubanks with an assist that he doesn't deserve anyway, to be honest. Yeah. So Plumlee's a lot better than that. I also got a kick out of this. I don't know if you were watching Mason Plumlee highlights on YouTube like I was yesterday.
Not yet, no.
Well, there's a video from the official NBA YouTube channel, which I thought this was really funny. An official NBA YouTube channel video titled Mason. I've almost called him Miles like 5 times already. Called Mason
me
Plumlee.
too. I got it in my head now.
I know. It was like Mason Plumlee sick handles compilation or something.
Well, he's got a couple like JaVale McGee style fast breaks.
Oh my God,
I got him in my memory. Yeah,
he's got some absolute sauce to his game. But a couple of things were funny about that. First of all, just the fact that the NBA YouTube channel considered Mason Plumlee enough of a household name to make a whole video about him in that context. It's highlighting the fact that what he does is unique. But the other aspect of it was every single highlight in that video, he was on a different team. So it would be like, here he is in Charlotte, here he is with the Clippers, here he is with Detroit, what other teams has he played for? He played for he started his career with Brooklyn, Denver. Yeah, it was like every single highlight was a different team, which was funny. And now he's on another one.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm excited about it. I think there were worse things you could do in free agency for centers. We had a list of guys, and I think that Mason's pretty much right up there with the guys that we were talking about, as far as being an acceptable minimum contract for the Suns. I think he'll be fine. I think he'll be effective as a backup center.
You mentioned the free throw shooting,
not to mention other guys who could play center on the team. It is definitely center by committee. With 4 guys who could potentially play center on the roster right now.
You mentioned free throw shooting too, so I just wanted to bring up Plumlee, for his career up until basically the past year, was one of the worst free throw shooters in the league. But there's some hope there, and I'm wondering if it factored into the Suns' decision making at all. Did you know he shoots free throws left-handed now?
Yes,
since he got to the Clippers. So he was his form looks disgusting either way. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna lie. It looks,
how repeatable it is
it looks like it shouldn't go in, but here's just the honest stats. 57% free throw shooter from his career up until he arrived with the Clippers a year and a half ago. 57% on a sample size of, I don't know, over 1,000 free throws or something. Really bad. Not Bismack Biyombo bad, but still really bad. There was one season in there when he reached the absolute lowest point, where I think he was at that season with Charlotte, he was at 39%, and that was only 3 years ago. 39% from the free throw line. He reformed things in the past year and a half. He shoots free throws with his left hand now. And in a season and a half with the Clippers, do you want to guess, or do you already know?
No, I mean, I had it in front of me, so I won't guess, but I don't remember.
73.
Oh. I mean, that's probably better than Nurkic finished because of his thumb injury.
Absolutely better than Nurkic. 73 is a solid free throw percentage. So, if that holds, if that's something, I mean, I don't think it projects to be like if, you've got Bud in the war room being like, give me Mason Plumlee. I'm going to teach him to shoot threes left-handed, and he's going to shoot 40%.
We're finishing games with Mason Plumlee on the floor.
I don't think that's going to happen, but if he can continue to shoot even 65 to 70% from the free throw line, and the other big thing I just want to point out is, like, yes, he's 34 years old. Yes, he's coming off an MCL injury. That's big at his age. But Mason Plumlee has always had a reputation of being an athlete. He's not like the standard exactly white big that James Jones goes for, right? Like this is not. Right. This is like
he doesn't shoot. Is that what you mean? Yeah.
Well, yes, he doesn't shoot, but also just like this is not Frank Kaminsky, Dario Saric, Jock Land. Even Jock Landale I would put in this category. He's not one of those guys. There was a time in his career 5 years ago, and this is the version of Mason Plumlee that unfortunately we're not getting because we're too late. There was a time where he was catching like a lob every single game. He can't do that anymore. If you look at the stats, he's not like, it's a little bit more layups, a little bit less of the dunk stuff now, but he can still get above the rim. I think he's still more of a lob threat than Eubanks, and certainly a better finisher than Nurkic. It's not even close when you compare those two. So I think there's enough separation there to still give you an advantage over Drew Eubanks and feel confident about the signing. He's not perfect in that realm. Like I don't think he's going to be like maybe JaVale McGee when we had him a couple years ago, who was just like pulling off uber athletic moves all the time. I don't think he's at that point in his career anymore, but I would love to be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more, well, a lot more, about Mason Plumlee as we go forward. But we should also mention the Suns did sign another player to a two-way. Colin Gillespie. We haven't decided how we're going to pronounce his name. Gillespie or Gillespie?
Yeah,
we're going to have to find that out.
I'm going to go
Maybe
with Gillespie.
Somebody will correct us if it's wrong. But Colin Gillespie, he's a point guard, 6'1". You pointed out before we recorded that he was teammates with Mikal Bridges, which I had no idea about when I was doing this research. I believe he's, 25 years old, I think, or about to be 25 years old. Yeah, so, and he's on the Suns. He's an interesting guy, interesting player overall for the Suns to sign on a two-way. It's not, they have options to sign guys that are just in the G League. A two-way gives him the opportunity to potentially play in NBA games if the Suns needed a point guard in any scenario. So in some ways, they got a point guard. In other ways, of course, this is probably a player that's not going to see the floor very much and will probably spend a lot of time running the show in the G League. Small guy, 6'1", 195 is how he's listed on Basketball Reference, but kind of an interesting player. And the first thing I saw was Sam Vecini, who said he thinks that Colin is an NBA player. Sam Vecini is the guy who watches all the tape. I don't have a lot of experience watching a lot of this film other than what I watched right before we recorded today.
Sam Vecini,
the highlights were fun.
Is a sicko.
But what do you think?
He is an absolute sicko. He knows those guys who end up going undrafted, back end of the second round types, and then they end up playing overseas or in the G League. He knows all those types. So Sam directed me to just looking at Colin Gillespie's G League stats, where he played this year. I think this is a reason to go check out the Valley Suns, first and foremost.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
You're going to get to see this guy, and you're going to get to see Jalen Bridges, who we talked about briefly, too. Both of them shooters. I think that's important to note. Last year, the Suns' two-way players were not shooters. I mean, they were the complete opposite. It was Saban was a two-way, right? I want to say?
Yes.
So Saban Lee, Udoka Azubuike, and Ish Wainwright. Not shooters.
Teo.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Ish
was not a two-way last year. You're right. It was Teo Maladone as well.
Yeah.
Also not a shooter. So this year we're getting a little bit of the opposite. Jalen Bridges was able to shoot the ball really well in college. Gillespie in the G League this past season averaged 21, and I know G League guys, but 21 points, 9 rebounds, 10.5 assists on 40%. 9 rebounds at his size, and 40% from deep on 8 attempts per game at the G League level. That is awesome. Those are Russell Westbrook numbers. Russell Westbrook with 3-point shooting. That's obviously not what he's going to be at the NBA level, but he did shoot 39% on a very small sample size at the NBA level for the Denver Nuggets last season. And mostly, I just would say that if you're on the fence about going to a Valley Suns game and supporting them, don't be, because I think there's going to be real talent on that team, and some of these guys are going to have to plug in and fill holes for the Suns at various points during the season, which is exciting too. That being said, they are 1,000% still targeting an actual backup point guard who you can trust with one of their remaining roster spots.
Perfect transition for me, because currently they have 12 rostered players, the Suns do. Now, that does not include the two-way guys that you mentioned, which is Jalen Bridges and Colin Gillespie. So that is 12 players total. They're allowed to roster up to 15. Now, they don't have to. I believe they have to get to 14. I think that's part of the new CBA as well, so they need at least 2 more players. Can sign 3 more players. Now, we can start getting into some of the signings on other teams. We'll get into the big free agency news in a little bit. Let's focus on the Suns right now, but I do want to mention some of the guys that are off the board for the Suns that we talked about previously. Bamba is gone, but I think once they signed Plumlee, we just assumed that Bamba was not going to the Suns, right? There's no other center at that point. They already have 4, basically.
They don't need another center at this point. They need to prioritize everything else.
Yes. Goga, we mentioned it earlier, re-signed with the Orlando Magic. Chris Dunn. Actually, let's talk about this. Chris Dunn, Bamba, and Batum all signed with the Clippers. All 3 of those guys, which means that they kind of had, in some ways, what we wanted is Matt Ishbia losing the billionaire war here?
No. It's not quite the same, because what we wanted is to have our 3 superstars and still get those role players on minimum deals.
Yeah, that's true.
Which would have looked awesome. What the Clippers are doing, and don't get me wrong, I love
they're not even minimums.
Don't get me wrong, I love those 3 guys. I think they're good NBA role players, but they don't add up to Paul George. I mean, that's that's thinking that Josh Childress, Hakeem Warwick, and Hedo Turkoglu gives you Amari Stoudemire. To be entirely honest, like if that's what they're talking themselves into right now, it's just not it's not the same thing. I like Mo Bamba and I like Chris Dunn, and I like Nick Batum, who I'm sure is thrilled to be back in LA with his family, but it just ain't the same.
They also have Derek Jones Jr.
They do have Derek Jones Jr.,
well.
but I don't think you look at the Clippers right now as if you're one of these other teams in the Western Conference. You're not looking at them as the same type of threat, no matter how many role players they sign.
Yes. I'll mention Eubanks also gone off the market. Not that we expected him to return to the Suns, but signed for more than a minimum after the season he had. Kind of a insane thing. Went to the Jazz. It seemed like a salary floor deal to me. And for those who don't know, that every team has to get to 90% of the cap this year, so that some players are getting a little bit more than they should. And I also think
Tobias Harris. Cough.
Yeah. Tobias Harris is one of them. Eubanks is another. Maybe Rashawn Holmes for the Washington Wizards was another one I mentioned. And maybe even Jonas Valanciunas, who also went there. DeAnthony Melton got a full MLE amount, basically, from the Warriors as well, which is a lot, but it's only 1 year. Kind of a weird contract. I don't know if he expects to sign for more if he has a good season. Maybe he does. Or maybe the Warriors were worried about his injury history that we talked about on the previous podcast. We assumed he wouldn't go for the minimum. We just kind of threw it out there as like a cross your fingers and hope. And he is gone. Still out there, Josh Okogie and Damian Lee. I just first want to mention
this is
those 2 guys.
This is important. This is important for the Suns right here.
They could be the last 2 guys they sign, and they could just be done with free agency, right? That could be
that would be really.
But they
disappointing.
also out there, Kyle. Well, yeah, because there's no point guard, so I don't think that's going to be the case. But they could be 2 of the 3 if they end up signing 3 more players. Kyle Lowry, Monte Morris, players that we think the Suns are interested in. I think even Gambo reported. And Taurean Prince is still a player that's out there. In some ways, I think you could look at some sort of combination of Damian Lee, Taurean Prince, Kyle Lowry. If the Suns signed those 3 guys, that would be pretty good. I'd feel better about free agency at that point.
Let me just go on the record about this right now. So you're breaking down the fact that I think when the Bol signing came in, very thrilled to have Bol back, but I think that clarified things for me because now we knew at that point that there were only 3 spots left. And you're right, they don't have to sign 3 players right now. They could sign only 2, but I think they should use all of their roster spots.
I do too. Yeah.
By the way, this is all assuming, again, that the Suns have picked up David Roddy's team option, which I haven't seen anyone officially report, but I think is the case. Right? Am I wrong?
think it was on the transaction wire, yeah, so I think it's official.
Okay,
yeah.
so it does appear to be official then. That's changed in the last week.
They could still cut him or trade him or something.
That's exactly what I was going to
possibility.
say, is David Roddy is by far the least significant of these players, so if it came down to just waiving him and using that roster spot on someone else, I'm fine with that. I'm just saying, for now, David Roddy is taking up a roster spot, which means the Suns only have 3 available, and because they only have 3 available, they need a point guard, so one of the spots goes to a point guard.
Mm-hmm.
So
Monte Morris, Kyle Lowry, I'll throw those 2 names out because they've just been connected to the Suns by reporters.
Yeah. And then it gets interesting because do you give the last 2 spots to Damian Lee and Josh Okogie?
Yeah, it's tough. Man. I'd rather have 2 guys who could shoot.
Or do you make the tough decision at that point? And I think you've got to choose between them. I think you have to choose. And to be entirely honest, yeah, I like Josh too. I've had a lot of fun watching him play. But right now, with the wing being in the situation that it is for the Suns, you've got Dunn who can't shoot. You've got Little who can't shoot. You've got Roddy who can't shoot. You've got all of your bigs who can't shoot. This team needs spacing. And if that means choosing Damian Lee over Josh Okogie and then you use the last roster spot on a wing who can actually shoot, Taurean Prince would be a great example, but there are others.
And by the way,
that's the way you got to go, man.
I agree, man. I think when you picked Ryan Dunn, you might be done with Okogie. You're right. That might be the end.
I mean,
of,
if they had
Josh
said
Okogie
if they had said
today.
we don't actually we don't think we can keep Bol, then maybe you can keep Josh Okogie, yeah. But Bol just took away one more roster spot, and now it's or again you waive David Roddy.
David Roddy gets traded.
You waive David
waived.
Roddy, or you trade him for literally nothing and a lightly or a heavily.
You might have to attach a pick to him.
You trade David Roddy to some team that needs to hit the salary floor or needs to fill a roster spot for a heavily protected second-round pick in, I don't know, and just to get rid of him, and then you can keep Josh Okogie. But I'm just saying, if David Roddy's on the team in particular, you're going to have to make that choice between Damian Lee and Josh Okogie. And just right now, looking at the wing depth for this team, I think Damian Lee's got to win that battle. I mean, this team needs shooting bad.
Yeah. Damian Lee was good on the Suns 2 years ago, but suffered a pretty severe injury from all indications about that, and who knows if he'll get back there. His shooting when he was on the Suns at that time was the best of his career. He's never really done that, and to anticipate him getting all the way back there is pretty unlikely, but I do think they need somebody like him in the locker room and on the court if he can get back to what he was. I agree with you. I think that it's possible that Josh Okogie is his time is done on the Suns, and I think it's still possible they bring him back. Gambo did say the Suns were still interested in Josh Okogie, so it's possible they just go, yeah, we still want him. Maybe they see some sort of role for him, because as much as we talk about Dunn being a center, Okogie was chasing guards half the time as well, and that he can guard up as well. And if you think Dunn could do both of those things, then you might want to give him a chance. He's bigger, then that matters. He's bigger than Josh Okogie, but you can't, having that many non-shooters on the floor, 1 or 2 injuries from guys who can shoot, and then all of a sudden it's just really difficult.
I mean, dude, just imagine
to
what
put
happens.
Consistent, lineups together that has shooting.
When KD, so let's say Grayson's starting again, and then let's say KD has to miss a game, any game at any point. So now, and even if the other guys are still in the lineup, now KD's missing a game, so Royce is going to go into the starting lineup. That's right now your only shooter off the bench. And then your bench is what? Your bench is you've got Mason Plumlee at center, Ryan Dunn at power forward, Nasir Little at small. You can't do that.
And your
dude.
starting lineup has one guy over 6'5".
Yeah. You can't play that many non-shooters. They need another wing who can shoot.
It's another reason why, if they can trade Nurkic,
I'm glad you brought this up.
I know nobody wants to trade the 2031 pick. I understand the attachment to that. I understand. But you kind of have to attach that to him if you want to get anyone of value. If you can trade him for a wing that's taller, that could be that. I think that what you can do potentially with, and I hate to say this, if you can get another center, that would be great too. But what you could do with a potential center lineup of Mason Plumlee, and if you can get a center, I've brought the trade up before. That's probably, it seems like nothing like that is going to happen at this point. Day'Ron Sharpe or some other young center that you can get in a deal for Nurkic and the 31 pick. I don't know. It's hard for me to go, that's not better. I think it is better. I think it's still better to have another player who's taller who can shoot if you can get that for any trade out there.
So I think
it
it's
seems
better.
too small in their shooters right now.
I think it's better too.
Like the whole starting lineup would be 6'5" if you have Royce in there. You know?
Well,
6'5", 6'5", 6'5", 6'5", and a center.
Yeah.
That's not good.
Well,
but
all the more reason, man. We need to talk about Nurkic because people were. I mean, it's getting spicy, and this fan base has such weird feelings about Yusuf Nurkic at the moment. Can we just be honest about that? You feel it too, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know you want him traded, and I'm saying I'm okay with him being traded too. I think I'd be okay with the Brooklyn trade at this point, just because I think the fit is better. But can we not pretend dude, Yusuf Nurkic is not Satan. And I know a lot of people, that's a crazy
He's not
take.
Drew Eubanks. He's not Drew Eubanks.
It's become strange to me, some of the opinions I've been seeing espoused online. And I know I always have to remind myself, a lot of people who are regular listeners to this podcast, they listen every week. They're not on the whole Twitter shit show. They're not in on the drama. They're not they're just living happy lives where they touch grass outside. Good for all of you guys out there.
They have in real life arguments instead of online ones.
But there are people on Suns Twitter right now where you bring up the name Yusuf Nurkic to them at all, and it's just vitriol. It's just they start foaming at the mouth about how Yusuf Nurkic alone has ruined this organization, and he's become the new whipping boy for a lot of people. I think because, as I said it today, a lot of people don't want to point the finger at the three players making $120 million combined, because that's too hard of a pill for them to swallow. And so Yusuf Nurkic, who I agree is not an ideal fit, especially in Bud's system. I think for Gambo to go out and say Nurkic is going to look so good in Bud's system. Based on what?
Yeah.
That doesn't
What is
make
he going to
sense.
do offensively? Yeah, what is he
exactly.
going to do?
He can't shoot threes and he can't finish at the rim. So that I think is just not true. But at the same time, we did have a borderline top 10 defense even with Nurkic as our center. And he is a good passer, and he did literally hold it down for our entire rebounding was thanks to Yusuf Nurkic. Nobody else on the team was grabbing rebounds, including Drew Eubanks. So where I start to get frustrated is this idea that Nurkic is so bad, apparently to some people, that it's just replacing him as the silver bullet, and then everything else about this team will be fine.
No.
That's bullshit.
Yes.
That's not true.
It's definitely not true.
We have way
it's
more
definitely
problems than just Yusuf Nurkic, who literally led the team in plus minus. I know some people don't
I'll
like
go
that
even
stat,
beyond
but
that. I'll go even beyond that and say that for more than half the season, Nurkic was pretty good, actually a good NBA player. I think his thumb injury did dramatically impact him as the season went along because his free throw shooting tanked. And but overall, I think he had ultimately a super positive. He had the highest offensive, the Suns had the highest offensive rating with him on the floor of any player on the team, and that was held down the entire regular season. So obviously, he had a large impact on that. But he also had a large impact on the defense because when he went off the floor, it just completely cratered too. So overall, he had a positive impact in the regular season. And if you're talking about finding a way to survive the regular season, he's probably going to be pretty helpful with that. But
playoffs, yeah.
in the playoffs,
no, I get it.
He has an exploitable flaw in his offense that there's just such a huge spotlight on what that flaw is, because if you can't score from anywhere on the floor except at the rim, and if you do have somebody at the rim guarding you, then that percentage tanks, and then your free throw shooting tanks. The extent to which teams are going to allow him to have the ball in his hands as much as possible and just guard the rim and not worry about him anywhere else on the floor, I think is a problem. Now, you can find ways to make guys come up on him when he's passing to cutters and shooters and stuff like that, so you can find ways to do it. But it's so exploitable with a good team who really is ready for it. And I even think after what happened in the playoffs, it might even be more exploitable in the regular season after every team has that tape to watch. Now, not every team has McDaniels running around those screens to guard Devin Booker, so it's possible that just gives Devin Booker more space to go off. But I do think after seeing what happened in the playoffs, I understand why people feel the way that they do. I don't think that it's guaranteed that a Nurkic trade fixes... if all of a sudden you get a big wing, Dorian Finney-Smith is a guy we've brought up 1,000 times at this point, because he's one that's available. If all of a sudden you get Dorian Finney-Smith and you don't have Nurkic anymore and your rebounding just completely disappears, well, now you have a new problem, right? You're just creating a new problem.
You don't just want to, you don't want to make a lateral move that just creates a new problem. And to that point, I don't know, you could talk me into certain big wings making enough of a difference that we can then do a whole center by committee thing. Interesting stat kind of related to that. Mason Plumlee last year, remember on the free agency episode how I was trying to highlight guys, my big theme was let's find guys who have a track record where you can put them into a bit of a bigger role and they've got success there. Well, Zubac's had a mostly healthy season for the Clippers this year, but when Mason Plumlee did start, the Clippers went 8-3. It's just another example of kind of exactly what I'm talking about. That doesn't mean, and in fact, if you go further, according to Cleaning the Glass, the most featured lineup with Mason Plumlee this year was when he was in that starting lineup because he was logging heavy minutes with James Harden, Terrence Mann, PG, and Kawhi. And then Mason Plumlee. That made it a 5-man lineup. That 5-man lineup had a 134 offensive rating this year. So there is a track record of success that I'm talking about that Mason Plumlee can step into a bigger role if need be. That doesn't mean I want him suddenly being the 82-game starter. But if you had to do some sort of center by committee thing where you get another guy back in a Nurkic trade, the thing for me is just that the wing piece element of it needs to be really good. Like, it needs to be a high-level defender and shooter. And I'm not sure if you can find that for Nurkic in a pick.
The Orlando Magic... This is all off the cuff, by the way. We didn't have a Nurkic section of our outline here,
I think we need to talk about it because other people are thinking about it and they're going crazy about it.
No, I'm glad. I'm glad. It's just I'm just kind of shooting from the hip here. That's why I'm letting people give me some grace in case this doesn't make sense yet. Goga Bitadze was brought back by the Orlando Magic, and that means they have 3 centers, and one of them is the brother of their star player on that team right now. And they need a point guard. Now, we've talked about potentially trying to get Wendell Carter Jr. from them by trading Grayson Allen. But maybe there's a way for the Suns to facilitate a point guard there by sending Nurkic to a team along with the 2031 pick, where a point guard now goes to Orlando, and now Wendell Carter Jr. comes to Phoenix, and now instead of replacing him with a wing, you're just replacing him with a big that maybe could be a better fit within Bud's system. We're talking about the actual fit in Bud's system. I don't know. Just trying to figure out if there's something out there.
Who's the point guard?
I don't know.
Who's on the trade market right now?
That's the problem. They're desperate for a point. They have, to be honest, I've thought this before, not that the Suns could be involved in this, but I think Trae Young, if he's going to get traded, he'd be kind of fun in Orlando if they could find a way to get him.
He'd be
not that that's on the table.
He'd be a lot of fun
but
in Orlando. Orlando is kind of uniquely equipped to maybe insulate Trae a little bit from, some of his weaker spots defensively. I don't know if they have the assets though. Trae Young's a big trade. It would be hard. For
that's
Suns
not, and that's not
there.
the one that the Suns could get involved. I don't know. Maybe they could get involved in there. That's another pick that they could send out there. That maybe if the Hawks are trying to tank, what do they want Wendell Carter Jr. for? In fact, they might want Nurkic's contract just to get them to the floor if they're tanking. Anyway, it's just a thought, just to throw something out there for those who like to use the trade machine. I have not tried to play with this a little bit. It's just I understand why people think Nurkic is, quote unquote, like the problem right now. I don't think he's the problem. I think, there's a lot of problems on this team. And a lot of it is if this team doesn't look great, and I mean great, when all 3 of the big 3 is on the floor, it doesn't really matter who the rest of the players are. Those guys have to carry what they need to carry in order for this team to be successful. Because ultimately, look at the salaries. Yeah. Just look at it. It's built around that.
Thank you.
It's not going to work if those 3 don't work.
Thank you, bro. That's all I'm trying to tell people is that
but beyond
they
that,
got to carry their weight.
Look, beyond that, if you're trading Nurkic, you got to trade him for something valuable right now. You can't just do it for nothing. It's not just getting rid of him makes you better. That's not the case that we're in right now. And so that's, to your point, I agree with that.
I think
if you're trading him, which I'm open to, you have to find an upgrade in fit for this team, in fit. And that's what matters the most.
There's a massive difference to me, I think, between because I think most people are in the trade Nurkic camp. If I had to pull Suns Twitter, I know not everyone is, but I think most people are just from what I've seen online. But I think there's a big difference between the camp of people who are like, yeah, let's get a Dorian Finney-Smith or a Wendell Carter, these other guys that we're talking about, and let's make the fit work. That you can sell me on. But then there's the other camp of people who are like, give me fucking Nick Richards and it'll be addition by subtraction. And I'm like, what are you watching? What are you talking about? That's not true. So it's just, I want to avoid excessively finger pointing at any one guy on this team because it's not any one person's fault. It wasn't exclusively Frank Vogel's fault. It's not exclusively Bradley
KD's
Beal's fault,
fault,
even though he had the
Devin
worst
Booker's
game 4 I've
fault.
ever seen. Yeah, or KD's
Yeah.
fault or Book.
Or
Obviously.
Nurkic's fault.
And it's not exclusively
It's definitely
Nurkic's
not Grayson's fault.
Well,
Dan
look.
Marley, hustle. winner.
Look, that Grayson injury in the first round was, I think we could have gotten a couple games off him if he was healthy.
At least one. Yeah, they could have won at least one.
He's
That's
important.
what I'm
He's
thinking.
important, man.
Can I just quickly say Nick Richards is not good? Yeah, just for those people
He's
out there. He's
not good. He's worse than Nurkic
the
by
Suns,
far.
Could the Suns make him better? Yeah, potentially if he's in a better situation, but we also don't have a point guard. But he's just not that good. You can get that out of your head. If I understand making fake trades for him, but let's not kid ourselves with thinking that he's like this massive upgrade. He's not very good. Before we move on to the rest of free agency, we talked about some of the guys that are still out there for the Suns. Now, I'm going to just repeat them. The names that I have written down, I'm curious if you have any more. Okogie, Damian Lee, Taurean Prince, Kyle Lowry, Monte Morris. Is there anyone out there else that you could think of that the Suns could potentially be interested in as far as guys who are still yet unsigned?
I'm still monitoring Jordan Nwora, just because of that Bud connection that we talked about. Same thing with Taurean Prince. A little bit less now just by virtue of the fact that he is not the shooter that Taurean Prince is, which I think really lends some extra additional credibility to Prince's name. There was briefly a rumor that the Suns were talking to Reggie Bullock, but then it was shot down, I think, by PHNX. And let me just say real quick that I'm perfectly happy if that's the case, because I know they need shooting on the wing, and Reggie Bullock, technically he can still shoot, but he can't really do anything else at an NBA level at this point in his career, I think. So, if that was their final signing, if it's to be your 12th or 13th man, fine, but it just wouldn't have impressed me. So I'm still hoping that the ultimate wing that they can sign to be a shooter can be a little bit more than a Reggie Bullock. Like Taurean Prince would definitely be more than that, and that's still what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, and that's why, based on the contracts that we've seen, like guys like Goga, for example, not being minimum players, I think that Prince might be out of the race for the Suns right now. I think I would not be surprised.
Have we talked?
If he signed for more than a minimum. By the way, I just want to mention Joe Ingles, who
he's
is
out
also
there.
a free agent. Just to put him out there as a potential guy that could be available to the Suns. He's not. I wouldn't say he's like an upgrade over Reggie Bullock like you're talking about. He's a better shooter probably, but just in the fact that he's older and is kind of, maybe losing a lot of that athleticism at this point of his career, you might be worried about that. But pretty good player overall, capable of running pick and rolls, can shoot. And it would be fun to have an Aussie on the team. But yes, have you talked about what now?
One guy who I'm fairly certain isn't a minimum player, but I don't think we brought him up because his team pulled his qualifying offer maybe even after we recorded. No, I guess they must have done it before we recorded our free agency pod, but he kind of just slipped our mind. Have we talked about Sadiq Bey? I wonder what Sadiq Bey's market is. I would have to assume he can get like at least a taxpayer mid-level from someone so that he's not really in
but if he can't, then that would be good.
If he can't, he'd be a high level minimum contract guy. He's 24 years old.
It'd be a 1 year prove it, try to get a bigger contract on a good team kind of thing.
He's 24 years old and he's already started over 200 games in his NBA career, right? So like that's that's real experience that we're talking about there. I just wonder what his market is. There's some guys, the guys I'm most interested in still in free agency, I will say, not even from a Suns perspective, but just their market kind of fascinates me. There's only 2 or 3 teams that have heavy amounts of cap space. And then there are all these teams with, $6 million or $11 or $12 million that they can offer in the form of various exceptions. The guys who interest me the most are the ones in the middle, who are coming off of contracts where maybe they're making 10, 15, even $20 million. And they know that no team with $30 million in cap space is coming to save them. They know that they're not going to get an Isaiah Hartenstein type deal, which, by the way, we should talk about that real quick. Most role players don't get the Hartenstein type deal. So they either have to re-sign with their current teams for maybe a little bit more, or they have to settle somewhere for a smaller exception. Like we talked about Tyus Jones on our free agency pod. No way in hell, if you ask me right now, is Tyus Jones going to sign a veteran minimum contract, but he was a starting point guard last year, leads the league in assist-to-turnover ratio basically every season, and he made $14 million last year, and I don't think anyone out there with cap space is going to give him that. So, I wonder about players like that and just kind of where their market settles. Like, do they have to end up taking $5 or $6 million from some team that's above the salary cap but not yet in the apron? That kind of interests me.
That is interesting. And, that's why free agency could take a few more days here, right? Because it's got to shake out. I actually think one of the reasons it's been stretched out even a little bit more is the salary floor that these teams do have to get. If you're a minimum player, and by the way, you can even factor this into guys like Damian Lee or Josh Okogie or even Drew Eubanks declining their options. They're just checking. They're checking to see if there's anything out there other than a minimum, because teams are going to spend more money for guys at the end of the roster like that now that they have to get up to the floor. And when you see guys decline their options on teams that they're currently on, I think we're at a point where it doesn't mean they're not returning. It means that now they have the opportunity to see what else is out there and try to get something else. So let's just say real quick, and then we'll switch over to talking about the rest of the NBA. Of the guys that are available, let's say, Taurean Prince, and I think I would say Taurean Prince, Kyle Lowry, and Damian Lee would probably be the best way to go.
That'd be knocking it out of the park at this point.
Right.
I know some people feel weird about Kyle Lowry. We didn't talk about him. Well, we did talk about him on the most recent pod, but I don't know. The vibe I get from some people online is that they just don't want to be involved in the Kyle Lowry shenanigans, or that they feel he's just too old.
I get that.
He's just too old.
He's a leader,
just too
though.
undersized.
He's a leader.
For me, it's the leadership.
The Suns also
aspect.
need leadership, man. They really do.
No, seriously. Kyle Lowry would hold this entire team top to bottom accountable. I think he'd be a good mentor for the rookies, even though they play different positions. I think he'd be a good mentor for the stars. This team needs leadership, like you said, and I think Kyle Lowry would bring that in spades. Plus, he's comfortable playing off the ball. He can still shoot threes. He doesn't look to score in the same way anymore, but I think he'd be valuable enough on the court to make it work.
All right, let's talk about what else has happened in the NBA. And we'll touch on this quickly. I didn't expect, to talk for almost an hour about the Suns, considering they only signed one player, but we almost got there somehow. Now, some of the more interesting things that have happened, I'll just mention all of them real quick, and then we'll talk about them in more detail. Klay Thompson to the Mavericks, Paul George to the 76ers, along with a couple other players that are interesting. Chris Paul to the Spurs. Hartenstein to the Thunder, maybe, as far as the Suns are concerned, the biggest move, because that team is starting to look more and more like a team with very little flaws, which is a little scary. And Kentavious Caldwell-Pope to Orlando, which I think those are probably the 5 most interesting things that have happened. And I think let's start with the last one, because the KCP to Orlando thing, we're watching this slow dismantling of what could have been a year after year title contender in the Denver Nuggets. We're watching a team take apart a championship team, take apart their team to save money. A championship team, a team that actually won. And I think it's just an absolute embarrassment from the Denver Nuggets to not keep them together. Just an embarrassment.
No, you're right, but their justification might be the fact that they won, so they don't care anymore. It is an embarrassment.
Pathetic.
You're right. It is an embarrassment, but I think that might be it. I think we might be telling a different story with the Denver Nuggets right now if they had lost in the finals instead of won. I think I saw that some odds makers have the Nuggets as the favorite in the West still right now over the Thunder, even after the Hartenstein trade and KCP leaving to Orlando. I think that's kind of insane right now. Denver's going to be good. Jokic is the best player in the NBA, but he needs shooters around him to make the whole thing work, man. And you contrast that experience with OKC, And look, I get it. People are saying, oh, they paid $30 million to a guy who averages 7 points per game. But that's not the point with OKC. The point was they needed someone to do big man things in the middle and hold it down and bang with the Jokic's defensively of the league and solidify their defense and rebounding. He's also quite comfortable with the ball in his hands. And it's exactly what you said, Mike. You look at the Oklahoma City Thunder right now, they have very few flaws as long as Shea stays healthy, because obviously Shea is the engine that runs their entire offense. But you have another year of growth.
And all the young guys, like, I know growth is not linear, but all the young guys are probably going to be better next year.
Yes. If you get another year out of Jalen Williams and Chet developing in the way you want, and then you know exactly what Caruso is going to give you in a low-usage role. You know exactly what Hartenstein is going to give you in a low-usage role. They just re-signed a couple of their other role players like Aaron Wiggins and Isaiah Joe to long-term deals. Look, shit, man, I know they're young, but they have the playoff experience now. Like, they're not that young anymore, and they might be my favorite to win it all as of just today. We got to see how the rest of this stuff shakes out, but the Thunder, as of right now, is the team that I'm probably least looking forward to playing next year, because I think they just might have our number. We'll see. You know, they already have a bit of a history of just running us out of the gym and taking control of the pace of a game and just punching you in the face in the first 4 minutes, and you're down by 15, and then the game's over.
They embarrassed the Suns multiple times, and part of that was because they had stretch big. Now, I actually think in some ways, as far as a matchup problem for the Suns, if they have Hartenstein in there, that actually benefits the matchup for the Suns in a way, because you don't have to worry about Nurkic getting out there and running around. And
but they could always, in those games, they could always, and I know they're paying him $30 million, but they could always just play Hartenstein 12 minutes that game and run mostly Chet at the 5. And, it's
probably
their ability it's their ability to mix and match that makes them a real threat to anyone in the NBA.
That's why they're scarier in the playoffs. That's what makes them more of a playoff threat. But let's just quickly get back to the Denver Nuggets real quick. I just want to read. I think they have the case. You could make a case that they have the worst bench in the NBA. So let's just go through the starting five. Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, Jokic, and then Christian Brown. That we're assuming.
Great starting five. Yep.
Pretty good. I would say not as good as it was, obviously, in the past with KCP, because I think people forget. People forget that KCP was a bucket. No, for real. Like, he was actually really important to their title run. And as there's a lot of scenarios where clutch shots were hit by him. And he did that in the past as well. There's a reason he's a multiple-time champion.
You know, even if you go back a year before that, also Bruce Brown. Like, this is multiple years in a row now that they're losing. There's this attrition of role players for them. So KCP's the second guy.
Their bench right now, and they have time. They can't add much, right? Because they're right at the tax limit. But their bench right now is Jalen Pickett, Julian Strawther, Peyton Watson, Hunter Tyson, Darren Holmes, and Zeke Naji.
That is a whole lot of 23-year-olds who have proven nothing at the NBA level.
That sounds like I'm reading the roster for the bench
Detroit
for the
Pistons.
Washington Wizards or Detroit Pistons.
100%. Yeah, it's really bad.
Which some of these guys might be good soon, but they're not proven now, and they're not really good right now. They're just fine.
All the more reason that I don't understand with free agency. Like, if you're a team like Denver, you don't have the opportunity. You can't afford to wait it out and like see what other teams are doing. You need to target three of the best. How many spots do they have left on their roster? 2, 3? You need to target two or three of the best veteran minimum options right now in free agency. Like like the Suns wanted to do last year with Eric Gordon. But like, you need to be striking those right now. And the fact that we didn't see them make those moves in the first 24 hours of free agency is just shocking.
And the one rumored move they're going to make is Russell Westbrook.
Oh, yeah.
Which actually does improve their bench. But that is a bad place to be, where Russell Westbrook is like necessary to make your bench work, because the idea is that he's Bruce Brown, right? He could do all the Bruce Brown stuff, except that Bruce Brown was a good shooter, which did help them. And, I do think that, Jokic kind of makes everyone work, so he could make Russell Westbrook work on that team. But it is just a weird scenario where it's just watching this team that was awesome get dismantled for money reasons by owners that aren't hurting for money right now. They have a ton of money. We'll talk more about that later, because that's going to be a storyline for the Nuggets all year, I think. Klay Thompson to the Mavs. I don't know what to think about this. I mean, like, they're obviously, that's like in the best case when he's on and he's playing great, that team's going to be pretty hard to beat on those days. But he doesn't have those days every day anymore. You know, we're at the point of his career where he's getting worse every year. And he's injury prone. And they didn't give up a ton to sign him. Josh Green and 2 second-round picks. But that's a significant amount of salary that they're giving to him on a team that made the finals last year. And I don't know that they improved that much. I guess they did, but I don't know. What do you think? They're really building like the perfect villain for the Suns, though. For Devin Booker in particular.
Yeah, that's a good point. So in classic NBA hipster fashion, I look at the Klay sign and trade, and I'm like, okay, not really much of a reaction to that. He's going to take a lot of bad shots, and he's going to be a traffic cone defensively. He probably makes them better in the aggregate, but like, I think the Najee Marshall signing was probably better for the Mavs if we're going to combine
Well,
the two.
they lost Derrick Jones Jr., who was good for them, though.
Yeah, so they just needed to replace Derrick Jones Jr., and that's what they did in Najee Marshall. And Najee Marshall is not the love
they
threat.
replaced Tim Hardaway Jr. with Klay Thompson, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Who
Yep.
I don't know how different they are at this point of their career. You know,
Put it this way.
How different are they really?
Put it this way. We were saying that like, oh, the Magic, they got KCP, good for them because we were afraid that they were going to blow their money on someone like Klay Thompson. You know? So Klay is Klay's not a priority, I think, for teams anymore. I don't know.
Including the Warriors.
Well, I think it's kind of telling that like Klay's options were between LA, who just kind of, I know they're going to be good-ish, but they kind of just reek of desperation. The Lakers, that is not the Clippers, and then the Mavs were his options. He was deciding between those two teams, and I think it probably makes the Mavs a little bit better, but not to the point where I consider them a threat.
I think that we're at the point of Klay's career where we're speaking of championship team being dismantled. The Warriors let him go, and it's kind of universal that everyone thinks it was the right choice. And that, that's kind of sad overall, especially if you're a Warriors fan. But that's where they are. That's where we all are, I guess. That's just kind of where his career is. And I mean, it could work really well. I think there's a chance that if he comes back, looking healthier and better and more motivated than he has in previous years, it could look really good. But there was a lot of clips of Klay Thompson getting crossed over by players like Devin Booker and then flashing the four fingers while he went to the bench because he couldn't be played anymore. And that's who he is now.
Yeah,
Paul George.
They need Derek Lively basically to be Defensive Player of the Year on that, on that team now to cover up for all three of those guys between Luka getting blown by and Klay and Kyrie holds his own mostly, but even so, he's undersized. Like that's a lot for those front court players to have to deal with. Can I just point out, I know you're about to talk about Paul George, but I'm going to try and wish something into existence here. We have officially crossed the hour mark, which I didn't expect this pod to even be this long, but we're in over an hour here. Not a single thing has happened. I've refreshed my Twitter feeds to see if anyone's announced anything since we started recording. We started recording immediately after Mo Bamba agreed to a deal with the Clippers. It's been an hour here. Like I said, there's over 100 free agents left. We're more than a day into free agency. What the hell is going on? No one wants to work anymore. Apparently, these GMs, they got to pick up their lunch pails and get back to work because this is weird.
Yeah.
Paul George.
They're all watching the men's USA soccer game. Paul George, this was sort of telegraphed. I think this one wasn't announced until after you went to bed at the very least. I saw it right before I went to bed. And Paul George signed with the 76ers. They're filling that roster with pretty good talent, I would say, so far. Kelly Oubre. By the way, enemies, Paul George and Kelly Oubre, as far as I knew, now on the same team. He also returned. Tyrese Maxey, we all expected it, signed his max extension. They got a pretty good team brewing there. I think they have a good chance to be one of the best teams in the East. I think that you could, if you were to tell me the Knicks, the 76ers, and the Celtics were the three best teams in the East next year,
Dude,
that would feel right.
That
that would feel right.
That Knicks-Sixers rivalry is gonna hit. Like, that feels good. Just when those two teams play each other. I mean, I know neither of those teams like the Celtics either, but there's something about New York and Philadelphia, just like the sheer aggression of those two fan bases and the people who inhabit those cities. I think will be really fun. I did see a really funny tweet that I had to retweet of just being like, man, the Sixers are making moves. I could see them making the Eastern Conference semifinals next year.
Yeah,
and I was
so
just
good.
like, yeah, okay. Like,
what's the kid's name that they drafted that does the TikToks, the 76ers?
oh my God, McCain, right? Oh,
Yeah,
dude, he's
yes.
going to get eaten alive. He's going to get...
Can I just say that is the funniest fan base for him to go to,
It's
right?
so funny, dude.
Is it not? Like, of
yeah.
all the teams in the NBA, because I think it would be fun for most fan bases, but the 76ers fans have to pretend like they're the toughest, gruffest of all fans in the NBA, and now they have their new rookie.
Literally their most...
pretty likable.
Literally their most popular player on social media by virtue of the fact that this guy has like 3 million TikTok followers and it's just him dancing in front of the camera, dude. It's Jared McCain,
in his jersey.
The freshman from Duke, for those who don't know. He has a really popular TikTok account. Yeah, it's hilarious.
Seems like a fun dude, but that I could not help but laugh at the fact that of all the teams that now are going to be essentially forced to root for him, not that you shouldn't want to, but from the 76ers fans' perspective, it's just funny.
I was glad to see
to go there.
I was glad to see them keep Kelly. Just real quick note on that. The fact that they were able to still find a spot for him. Obviously PG's coming in mainly to replace and do more than just replace, but he's taking the spot of Tobias Harris more so than anyone else. So there is still room, evidently, for Kelly in that organizational structure, and he had a good season for them last year. I think he can continue to be an important part of what they're trying to do.
Yeah, the question for them remains health, and they added another question mark in Paul George. So that will be what we're talking about when it comes to the playoffs for them. Last one, well, we talked about Hartenstein. Yeah, so last one, Chris Paul.
I love this.
Up.
I love
this. It's so fun. It is fun, and part of what makes it fun is that they're not going to be contenders. So if you think there's a possibility that the Suns are, then you can just consider it fun without it being like this direct challenge to what the Suns need to face. I mean, there's a possibility that they are in the play-in game versus each other, I guess, if things don't go right for the Suns and things go very right for the Spurs, but Chris Paul, look, he's at a point of his career where he's not going to be great on a day-to-day basis, but he will be great sometimes. And what he adds to that team is somebody who can get the ball to Wembanyama, and what they don't have is a lot of players who are capable of getting the ball to Wembanyama. So I think overall, it's pretty fun. We get to watch how that impacts. I think his stats are going to be inflated. Like, we're going to see Wembanyama with a ton of points next year. And yeah, I like it. I like Chris Paul still. I'm rooting for him. Can't help it. Even when he's on the Spurs, I kind of want Chris Paul to succeed. Sorry to say it.
So do I. I can't remember if the Spurs still have cap space or if Chris Paul's eating up most of their cap space. So I apologize for that. But
no, I think they do. It's an $11 million contract, I believe. I think.
Yeah, but you think they still have some
space.
More? Because
only if they renounce guys, because I think they're technically an over the cap team right now.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it entirely depends on how they want to use that, but there's a lot of guys left, and I kind of feel like if they play it right, keyword play it right, they've got they've got 4 good players right now, in my opinion, between Wemby, Devin Vassell, and then borderline Chris Paul, borderline Trey Jones. Keldon Johnson, I think maybe, I'm just saying what I would do if I was the Spurs right now. I would want to actually try and compete next year. I would see if I could flip Keldon Johnson for anything. Is Zach Collins still under contract, or is he a free agent?
Yeah, he is.
So Zach Collins is still there.
They extended him last year.
Yeah, so, okay, maybe Zach Collins is borderline your 5th decent player. But, I think if they play their cap space right and flip a couple pieces and give themselves an actual bench that isn't just, 22-year-olds, there's a path there. Depending on how dominant Wemby is and how generational he is in year 2, there's a path for them to play 500 basketball. It's not going to be easy. By no means is it going to be inevitable in their conference. I'm just saying, depending on other guys they sign in free agency, there's a path that we see the Spurs being like an actual competitive team as soon as next season. And Chris Paul can really put them on the fast track to that. Now, there's also a possibility that, they win 24 games. But regardless,
and maybe they want that. You know,
Maybe.
like they could still potentially draft
Get Cooper Flag,
and then
oh my god,
and then
that
we're in
would
trouble.
be
Yeah,
insane,
yeah.
dude. That would be absolutely insane.
Yeah.
But
so I could see them even wanting. Chris Paul doesn't want that though.
yeah.
But even if Chris Paul is there just to be the mentor, I think that's something that he's probably embracing. I don't think he would sign on the Spurs expecting to, be like the 3 seed or something. I think he knows what it is. He's there to teach these guys and be a positive impact on their careers. So kind of fun for him. Any other free agency signings that stood out to you that you'd like to touch on?
Let's look.
There wasn't much in general. We talked about like 50% of them.
Most of these guys
this
are
podcast
just
already.
going back. We made fun of Tobias Harris, which was important.
Yeah, it was important. Yeah,
Jalen Smith to the Chicago Bulls, 3 years, $27 million. Our guy's sticking
Yeah, he got a
around in the
contract.
NBA.
Yeah.
Good for him. Good for him on that one.
I thought that was interesting. I actually think it's a scenario where it would have been really nice if he was still on the Suns, because we're talking about desperately wanting a big who could shoot.
Yeah.
And maybe his career is just being a backup big who could shoot.
I blame Sarver
but
for that
that's
one,
a pretty
though.
good career. You could have a pretty good career. It's
So,
100% Sarver.
It
was all about money.
Well, I still blame James Jones for picking him in the first place over Tyrese Halliburton.
Well, of course.
But after
Of
that,
course.
given the fact that, okay, James Jones, technically you were right, Jalen Smith can play NBA basketball. He just shouldn't have been drafted over Tyrese Halliburton, Devin Vassell, and Desmond Bane, but that's fine. Then it was the fact that they didn't develop the guy and Robert Sarver didn't want to pay him in year 4. Yeah, so it's his fault for that one. Did anything else happen? No, I think basically all the rest of these are pretty boring, or just players staying with their current teams.
All right, let's get out of here and get this up as quickly as possible before something else happens. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We'll be back. We'll be back to talk about whatever happens next. We were anticipating a Patreon podcast this week, but we might just have to do a regular one because we're assuming the Suns just add some more players to this team very soon. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We'll be back very soon.
For over a century, Johnny Walker has shared its bold spirit with the game of golf. Now, crafted with Devereaux Golf, Johnny Walker introduces the Johnny Walker Blue Label-inspired Sunday Golf Bag, elevating the game with sleek design, Blue Label hues, and refined gold accents. Celebrate your hole-in-one with a premium Sunday bag crafted by Devereaux Golf. Submit proof of your achievement to johnnywalker.com/blue-in-1. Please drink responsibly.